Developer Spider's Games have clearly learned a few lessons since their last RPG, Mars Warlogs. Back with a bigger budget and a wealth of feedback, most if not all of the key criticisms of their previous games have found some sensible remedy. Not to devalue these meaningful changes, it's impossible not to contrast this game with Mars, because many of BBF's key features are extended and polished aspects of what worked throughout last year's Martian adventure. For instance, Mars' in-depth crafting mechanic has been extended and drawn out to offer meaningful statistic and visual changes to weapons and armour, and the ability wheel has been manipulated to allow for a more combat-oriented Witcher 2 style blend of deliberate sword strokes and magical abilities. Combat has been evolved from clunky and simplistic to a much more dynamic fare, and it's combat that delivers most of Bound by Flame's enjoyment. Gone are the dodges and over-reliance on gadgets and traps to get you by, replaced with well-animated and varied tactical abilities that almost perfectly blend strategically dancing around the map with party tactics and demon powers. There are no classes in Bound by Flame, but you're able to spend points in 3 different combat trees. However, you're not able to avoid using one over the other for the whole game to an extent, because roguelike reflexes, blocking with bastard swords and magical demon powers, they all have their place, and you'll need to learn quickly what to use and for which situation. What initially feels like limiting your abilities quickly turns into the opposite, because although not discussed to any great extent in any of the marketing materials, Bound by Flame is taking more from Dark Souls in its combat than it is from Dragon Age, where blocking, dodging and careful use of magic and your team's abilities is absolutely key to success. You will die a lot. Now don't take my convenient comparison to Dark Souls too literally, because I'm only talking insofar as the amount of player damage you'll take and the concept of consciously mapping out your surroundings, carefully choosing who to pick off first and how. You can only take about 3 to 4 hits from some of the tougher enemies packed into a group, and getting surrounded is pretty much a death wish. This is made even more difficult by the removal of the ability to roll, and in fact when in the knight stance you can't even dodge. This means that defeating shielded enemies, sometimes on the front and the back, is a matter of carefully timing your blocks for a counter, learning when your enemy is about to strike and interrupting their attacks with a kick. No rolling and no dodging. On the other hand, the rogue stance allows you to step back dodge, but leaves you with weaker weapons, more vulnerable to greater attacks. For the most part, this duality added an interesting depth to the combat of BBF, and there's a lot of combat, but I found myself speccing into the dual wielding tree much more than the knight, with the inability to dodge in that stance crippling to my playstyle. This left the knight's stance relatively underpowered, which was a problem towards the end of the game where blocking became much more necessary. That and needing powerful weapons to break shields, something you can't do when you're dual wielding. Like Dragon Age, however, you're able to bring along an ally on your journey of your choice, depending on dialogue choices you make throughout the game and the narrative decisions you make along the way. Each enemy can cause major damage, but some specialise in debuff abilities or healing, ranged or melee. You can change their attack style both in discussion with them in towns or during combat using the tactical wheel. Party members with debuffs and curses came in very handy during bosses, slowing their attacks and turning additional enemies against them for a short duration. Unfortunately, BBF suffers from the same issue Mars Warlogs experienced, in that your allies will almost certainly die during about 80% of the boss battles, revived when it ends. I'm sure this is a toss-up between allies doing meaningful damage with lesser health and poor damage with more health, but the AI seemed unable to defend itself unless you chose the defend yourself stance from the tactical wheel, but even that extended their life only by a little bit. Other notable improvements are in the voice acting, where Mars suffered heavy criticism. Here there's a varied and relatively talented cast and much more dialogue of a notably higher quality. There are Dragon Age moments of exposition at the player's choice for those who want to take the time out and learn a little bit more about their allies, but don't expect to get in their pants, even if you do have the horns. Okay, that was a terrible joke, moving on. BBF is definitely an RPG, but it's an ARPG, and by that token this is an action-focused game. There are quests and plenty of side quests, but the meat of the gameplay is dedicated to tactically hacking your way through the map, fighting some awesome bosses along the way. On the PS4, frame rates are steady at 1080p with minimum slowdown on a few notable occasions, and everything is rather pretty. However, the stretched budget does manage to poke out in some of the level design elements during the middle of the game, where maze-like questing zones are laid out in lanes running back and forth, fighting enemies that respawn for different quests. This isn't nearly as notable as in Mars, but whilst BBF does the best it can with what it has, fans of wide-open exploration might be disappointed if that's what you were looking for. The paths you choose throughout the game are more narrative than they are terrain, which is where the key story intrigue shines through. You're possessed by a demon, something that either diminishes or grows stronger based on subtle choices throughout the game. To the team's credit, you were never asked, do you want to be a demon, having it left at that, so much as how you react to the dialogue choices and things like that.
What? He's the one who imprisoned me, with no food or water, and barely clothed.
I what? You lying bitch! Don't listen to her.
Father?
She is trying to manipulate you. Use your brain, child.
I'm begging you, get me out of here. I can't hold on much longer.
Picking sides will inevitably turn certain allies against you, and unlike in many RPGs, it's not something you can actually easily predict from the get-go. If you have a favourite ally, it might be easier to figure out how to keep them around, but at a few pivotal story moments I was surprised by who I ended up brawling with, ultimately setting a trend for my progression as a demon, for which I grew horns and lost the ability to wear a helmet. In compensation, my magic regenerated much faster. Fans of crafting should be happy, since there's plenty to collect or purchase along the way, crafting legendary items stronger than what you'd find in shops. Unfortunately, I found it much more efficient to collect all the rarest minerals in the first few zones, sell them at extortionate prices, purchase 200 health potions for the rest of the game, using up all my money there, and then recollecting all the regions for better items towards the end of the game, safe in the knowledge that I had infinite health potions to keep me alive. You will need them. This seems a little unbalanced, but throughout the game the ability to purchase health potions is limited, so I found it desperate to stock up. That said, it's absolutely necessary to craft upgrades to your gear because you're going to need all the help you can get. As an action RPG, Bound by Flame is easily a success given its cheaper $42 price tag on the PS4 or around £28 on the PC. There is a huge amount of dialogue and character intrigue, and whilst it might be a little light on the overall story, the mechanics themselves and the meat of the gameplay are unaffected by the smaller budget, delivering tight tactical hacking and slashing for a hardcore crowd. Those who float their way through Arkham City with one hand on the controller and the other holding a beer. BBF is a lot of fun, and with a little more money, a sequel certainly has the opportunity to go from good to great.
Prince Arundel? What are you doing here, my lord?
I followed you, Vulcan. I must save our king, with or without your aid.